Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says it's extremely unfair to blame Pakistan for the situation in Afghanistan. He was addressing the conference on Central and South Asian regional connectivity in Tashkent. The Prime Minister said Islamabad's foremost priority is to achieve stability in the war-torn country. He added that no country has tried harder than Pakistan to bring the Taliban to the table for dialogue. Pakistan, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan and the US have formed a new diplomatic platform to support the Afghan peace process. The State Department said long-term stability in Afghanistan is critical to regional connectivity. It said the forum will also foster regional trade ties. The United States has imposed sanctions on 7 Chinese individuals over what it calls Beijing's crackdown on democracy in Hong Kong. China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian said the US should stop interfering in Hong Kong affairs. In Western Europe, at least 120 people have died and hundreds more are unaccounted for after some of the worst flooding in decades. A record rainfall caused rivers to burst their banks, devastating the region. The death toll in Germany now stands at over 100, while 22 died in Belgium. Brazil has reported more than 1,500 COVID-19 deaths and over 50,000 infections in the past 24 hours. Pakistan has logged over 2,300 new infections and 31 new deaths overnight. Globally, the coronavirus caseload has surpassed 188.8 million, while the death toll is over 4 million. Those were the headlines in detail. Stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the Afghan conflict and other unresolved disputes are the key challenges to peace and stability in Asia. He made these remarks while addressing the conference on Central and South Asian regional connectivity in Tashkent. More in this report.
Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan is on a 2-day official visit to Uzbekistan. His tour is aimed at strengthening trade ties with a Central Asian country as well as bolstering efforts for peace in Afghanistan. Addressing the conference on Central and South Asian regional connectivity, Khan said Islamabad's foremost priority is to achieve stability in Afghanistan.
President Ghani, let me just say that the country that is going to be most affected by turmoil in Afghanistan is Pakistan. Pakistan suffered 70,000 people dead, 70,000 casualties in the last 15 years. The last thing Pakistan wants is more conflict.
The Prime Minister also hit back at Afghan President Ashraf Ghani's claims about Pakistan's negative role in the Afghan peace process.
I can assure you that no country has tried harder to get Taliban on the dialogue table than Pakistan. We have made every effort, short of taking military action against Taliban in Pakistan, we have made every effort to get them on the dialogue table and to have a peaceful settlement there. To blame Pakistan for what is going on in Afghanistan, I feel, is extremely unfair.
Later, the Prime Minister held delegation-level talks with President Ashraf Ghani. He also met EU's High Representative Joseph Borrell and discussed the emerging situation in Afghanistan. Khan stressed that the international community must play its role after the withdrawal of foreign forces from Afghanistan.
And for more on this, we have our special correspondent in Tashkent, Rashid Safi. Safi, thank you for joining. Please tell us about the important engagements Prime Minister Imran Khan had during his visit.
Central and South Asia Connectivity Conference held at Tashkent, Uzbekistan. Prime Minister of Pakistan Imran Khan received a lot of attention and respect at the conference. He reached Tashkent on July 15 and had one-to-one meeting with Uzbek President. Pakistan and Uzbekistan signed several agreements during this conference. President of Uzbekistan Shavkat Mirziyoyev presided the conference. Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad from US, Chinese Foreign Minister, Irani Deputy Prime Minister, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, and other international leaders participated in this conference. Afghanistan President Dr. Ashraf Ghani once again accused Pakistan for unrest in his country. In the response, Prime Minister Imran Khan strongly responded to President Ashraf Ghani's allegation. Prime Minister said Pakistan will be the last country wanting turmoil in Afghanistan. Prime Minister said that blame game should be ended. He said that peaceful Afghanistan is Pakistan's priority number one. Imran Khan said that Afghan Taliban are sensing victory. He said the perfect time for negotiation was when US and NATO forces were present in Afghanistan. Now it is too hard to bring Taliban on the negotiation. Prime Minister also said that Indian government is following RSS agenda, so it is not possible to have normal relations with India right now.
Rashid Safi, our special correspondent in Tashkent, thank you for the updates. And for more on this, we are joined by Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa, retired. General Mustafa, thank you for your time at Indus News. With the walls around Afghan government in Kabul closing in with every passing hour, is President Ashraf Ghani's practice of blaming Pakistan for the failures of Afghan defense forces a smart strategy that would pay off?
I think Ashraf Ghani is more or less redundant to the Afghan issue now, and it has been for quite some time. If you look at it, number one, when the talks started between the Americans and the Taliban in Doha, Afghan government was left out of it totally, and that would make a very clear signal that the Americans are not going to back up this system that they had placed in place. Then, more recently, you find that the kind of strategy adopted by Taliban and the very astute tactics have started paying off, and the pressure around Kabul and similarly other district headquarters is now increasing. With that, the Afghan forces, which had so-called been trained and equipped and prepared, they realize that fighting Taliban, who are part of them, and they also realize that the way Taliban have reached to these forces through their media campaigns and through well-organized dialogue system at the lower level, that is paying off. And the forces seem to be melting away. And then recently you find that Doha again beckoned Abdullah and Hamid Karzai. And Ashraf Ghani actually felt totally left out. So for him now, to say whatever he's saying, to me, frankly, is nothing more than kind of a porcupine striking back at whatever he thinks is his enemy. And he's trying to collect and corral all those elements which are anti-Pakistan within Afghanistan and outside Afghanistan. To that extent, that is, if you call it a strategy, but it's a poor tactics. With every passing day, those elements hostile to Pakistan, they also realize that without Pakistan, their survival, without Pakistan, peace in Afghanistan, and without Pakistan, further prosperity and development in Afghanistan is not possible. So therefore, I think this idea is now gaining hold, and Ashraf Ghani is more or less redundant, whatever he might say, will be a limited value, nothing more than that.
General Mustafa, we've seen that the United States, as well as the United Nations, have accused President Ashraf Ghani's government of corruption worth billions of dollars in Afghanistan. Do you believe Kabul government failed to deliver what was required for the people of Afghanistan?
I mean, to the extent that there'll be a lot of misappropriation and embezzling, whatever you might call it, and Americans and NATO forces were part of it. Let's not forget that. They also, I think, partied over whatever money was being spent in Afghanistan. Second, importantly, the rate of the Khan government was very limited. For them to adopt long-term development measures wasn't possible. They were not interested. They were more interested in buying people off to be able to get to a position of strength when ultimately Americans leave. But before that could happen, they are now been caught, with a hand and till. And to that extent, yes, Afghan people definitely have a grudge against money which has been taken on their name and wasted.
General Mustafa, the Afghan ambassador in India, said Kabul could call in help of Indian troops to Afghanistan to help fight the Taliban. How do you see this in the greater regional security perspective?
That India is interested to be in Afghanistan because, if you recall historically, Afghanistan has been used against Pakistan right from the day Pakistan came into being. It has actually attacked Pakistan physically, not once but twice or thrice. And they have been propagating against Pakistan in different garbs, whether it be Pakistan or Durrani line. And India has always been there. And it was there, and they thought that they have been able to develop, they bribed Afghanistan through $3 billion of so-called investment. That's more of a bribe to find a place in that country so that Pakistan could be attacked. So India would love that. But getting their boots on ground, I wish they do that. That will be the really end of Indian armed forces. Indians know that. Everybody else knows that. And if Ashraf Ghani is having that kind of ideas in his mind, I wish they come true, because Indians will be extremely stupid to get themselves involved with boots on ground with the Americans and NATO forces, tried with the top of their technology to do that in 21 years. They couldn't do that. And now when Taliban have occupied all spaces around the major cities and choked their responses and forcing them onto a political solution, and political solution now appears to be evolving, or it may take a bit of time, but you're heading towards that. So India is feeling left out. I think it's the worst sufferer from all this fiasco in Afghanistan is India, because all this investment seems to be going waste. If they put their boot on ground with Pakistan on one side, China on the other side, well, it's a very, very mouth-watering prospect, certainly.
Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa, retired, thank you very much for your time at Indus News. We really appreciate that. And now moving on, we are joined by Mr. Shehzad Chaudhary, Air Vice Marshal, retired. Mr. Chaudhary, thank you for your time at Indus News. First of all, how heavily does this dream of regional connectivity in South Asia depend on the peace and stability in Afghanistan particularly?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tipping point in Afghanistan at this time, strategically speaking, because a very long term of the foreign forces in Afghanistan is just about coming to an end. And that status quo, which had been imposed upon the region because of the foreign forces, is, of course, now changing. So that creates more opportunities and potential and promise for the region to turn the corner. Within Afghanistan, of course, the possibility of Afghans finding a new normal for themselves, creating a better consensus for themselves, and laying out a future prospect which will hopefully give them peace as well as stability within Afghanistan, which will then, of course, begin to impact the region around. The region, of course, in the meanwhile, has also moved on. The introduction of CPEC in Pakistan, the BRI initiative, the fact that the Central Asian states are more keen to now open up and find routes to further trade or developing trade in the region as well as across the world, and of course the possibility of Iran now coming out of a tight corner that the U.S. had placed it under because of heavy sanctions. If the US and Iran can come to some agreement in terms of the nuclear issue. So all these are the possibilities which have created that tipping moment for the entire region. And therefore, this flurry of activity that you see at the level of leaderships in the region is essential and important. It indicates to what all could happen and promise. So, of course, Afghanistan is the central piece there, but around that, a lot more is happening, which could decide favorably in terms of the future prospect of the region.
So, Mr. Chaudhary, do you believe there is a possibility of suitable peace and stability in Afghanistan anytime soon, considering specifically the number of spoilers over there?
Yeah, anytime soon is a difficult part there, because yes, as you mentioned, the number of spoilers. The region has been embroiled in a war for a very long time, and a lack of a central grid within Afghanistan meant that a lot of spoilers found foothold there, toeholds there. We popularly mention India there because of its presence in a huge way in Afghanistan, in the turmoil of Afghanistan, to try and impose a second front on Pakistan, which they had done in the last 20 years or so, 15 years. Now that became very evident, and of course India now openly says that Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa regions are the ones that are targeted by not only India, but of course the groups that are sponsored by India, especially Balochistan. And so therefore, yeah, that's been a hotbed of intrigue, of insurgency, of trouble for the region, especially Pakistan. Iran has been very threatened by how things have developed in Afghanistan. Central Asia has been, of course, not very settled, exactly for similar reasons. And so therefore, yes, that is true, that there are a number of spoilers, and it will take a while for any force that tends to dominate Afghanistan to overcome these hurdles and these groups and warlords that exist there. But hopefully, one prays and hopes, and one sees the possibility of more of a negotiated solution to the whole thing within Afghanistan, so that they do not have to enter a civil war proper to avoid, getting mired into another long war within Afghanistan. So therefore, if there can be a political consensus and a political way forward within Afghanistan, that will ease off a lot of pressure. And if there is a central authority that gets determined in Afghanistan or gets in place in Afghanistan, that will then hopefully enable a more stable or a relatively more stable Afghanistan, so that the rest of the world can find peace, and especially the region, which can then begin to develop a more longer-lasting relationship with Afghanistan.
Mr. Chaudhary, now Pakistan's narrative on regional security. It was one of the first countries in the region that talked about the importance of regional connectivity. Other than the Afghan issue, what are the key initiatives needed to enhance the trade and the transit conduits of the region?
Yeah, that's a very essential and an important point. Sometimes that's something that we miss entirely when we talk of just one paradigm, but that is a security paradigm. I think the security paradigm of Afghanistan, while is the key to the whole thing, but it will need more than the security leverages to be able to resolve it. And what that really means is that you want to solve the security predicament of Afghanistan and the region. But the way to that solution is through the economic imperative. And the economic imperative lies in how China wants to develop in the region. It has its own, loop, his own branches of the BRI and the CPEC, etc., and its own relationship with Kazakhstan and then Kyrgyzstan, etc. So they have their linkages, but here they are enabling their own trade as well as the region to get interconnected with all these connectivities that they are trying to create. So I think that is the key. If we can somehow tailor the direction of this entire process of trying to find a solution, a regional solution, into a more economic model, which was possibly talked of yesterday between the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the President of Uzbekistan, into seeing how Iran, Turkey, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and then the larger China, Russia, connectivity can also feed into this. I think this will then force the nations to look at the security paradigm in a different context. So my theory has generally been that the way out of the security paradigm is through the key of economic connectivity and economic prospects, and that is where the leaders must focus, because Afghanistan too will need to find its own means of sustenance, economic and financial, and therefore it will need to also have an economy developed around what goes around for trade in the region and in the between the rest of the countries. I think that is what is going to help them try and find better stability and security.
Mr. Shehzad Chaudhary, thank you very much for talking to Indus News. We really appreciate that. It's the time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The US, Afghanistan, Pakistan and Uzbekistan have formed a new diplomatic platform to support the Afghan peace process. The US State Department said long-term stability in Afghanistan is critical to regional connectivity. It said the forum will also foster regional trade and business ties. The parties will meet in the coming months to determine the modalities of cooperation. This is part of international efforts to secure a political settlement in Afghanistan amid the withdrawal of foreign forces. Now, Islamabad has rejected Kabul's allegations that Pakistan Air Force threatened its Afghan counterpart to support the Taliban. In a statement, the Foreign Office said Pakistan's Air Force never communicated with the Afghan Air Force. More in this report.
The Foreign Office said such statements undermine Islamabad's sincere efforts for the Afghan peace process. It said Pakistan acknowledges the Afghan government's right to undertake actions on its sovereign territory. The statement added that Islamabad took necessary measures within its territory to safeguard its troops and population. The Taliban have also rejected Kabul's claims, saying the Afghans can protect the Spin-Baltic border crossing. Earlier, Vice President Amrullah Saleh said Pakistan's Air Force warned Afghan forces against dislodging the Taliban from the area. He also accused Pakistan of providing close air support to the Afghan Taliban in certain areas.
Pakistan has postponed the Afghan peace conference scheduled to be held in Islamabad this weekend. In a statement, the Foreign Office said new dates for the conference will be announced after Eid al-Adha. The statement didn't elaborate on the reason for the postponement. Afghanistan's political leadership was invited to the conference in a bid to give a fresh impetus to the peace process. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the ideology of the RSS has become the impediment to peaceful coexistence with India. He was responding to a question by an Indian journalist. Let's take a watch.
We have communicated to India that we have been waiting for so long to exist together in a civilized manner. But what can we do when this RSS's ideology has come in the way?
लेकिन करें क्या, एक RSS की ideology रास्ते में आ गई है.
Moving on, Indian forces have martyred 2 more civilians in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The Kashmiri youths were targeted during an operation in Srinagar's Danmar area. Occupation forces have imposed a complete communications blackout in the area. The troops have carried out hundreds of extrajudicial murders during their so-called cordon and search operations. Rights groups say Indian forces have martyred at least 400 Kashmiris since August 2019. U.S. Chargé d'Affaires to Pakistan, Angela Aguilar, has called on Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa to discuss developments in the Afghan peace process. According to military's media wing, the two also discussed matters of mutual interest and the overall regional security situation. General Bajwa said Pakistan is keen to maintain bilateral engagement. The U.S. dignitary hailed Pakistan's efforts to bring peace and stability in the region. And Pakistan security forces have rescued 5 laborers in an intelligence-based operation in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. The military's media wing says they were part of a group of 16 abducted by the terrorists in Kuram district last month. It says 10 were released the next day, while 1 body was also recovered. On Tuesday, 2 soldiers were martyred in an exchange of fire with the terrorists. The security forces continued the pursuit of the terrorists. The media wing said the army is working hard to ensure the security of innocent civilians. Moving on, the United States has imposed sanctions on 7 Chinese individuals over what it calls Beijing's crackdown on democracy in Hong Kong. The Biden administration also warned international businesses of deteriorating conditions in the territory. China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian said the U.S. should stop interfering in Hong Kong affairs. The U.S. has been ramping up pressure on China since Beijing imposed a national security law in Hong Kong last year following anti-government demonstrations. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi says Beijing and Moscow should jointly combat the stigmatization of the COVID-19 pandemic. Wang made these remarks during a meeting with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. Wang said the 2 countries should work together to oppose the politicization of virus's origin tracking. Meanwhile, Lavrov wrote an article on the 20th anniversary of Russia and China's Treaty on Good Neighborliness. He said the military cooperation between the 2 is not against any third state. Lavrov said Russia and China do not accept the policy of regime changes, double standards, and unilateral sanctions. The United States and Germany have failed to settle a dispute over Russia's Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline. U.S. President Joe Biden and German Chancellor Angela Merkel met at the White House in Washington. In a briefing, they agreed that Moscow must not be allowed to use energy as a weapon to coerce its neighbors. Merkel said Russia could face EU sanctions if it violated its agreement to continue shipping gas through Ukraine. Biden said both leaders agreed to continue to support the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. They also agreed to collaborate to accelerate moves to tackle the climate crisis in emerging economies. The death toll from floods in eastern Germany has risen to 100. Authorities say more than 1,000 people are missing in Noir-Ahweiler region. At least 22 have died in Belgium after record rainfall caused rivers to burst their banks. Torrential rains have also troubled the Netherlands and France, prompting mass evacuations. Luxembourg has set up a crisis panel to respond to emergencies triggered by heavy rains. In Switzerland, Lake Lucerne reached the highest level 5 and will flood if the water rises just by 30 more centimeters. Forecasts suggest that more heavy rains are expected across much of the region today. Brazil has reported more than 1,500 COVID-19 deaths and over 50,000 infections in the past 24 hours. Now, globally, the coronavirus caseload has surpassed 188.8 million, while the death toll is over 4 million. More in this report.
While new waves of COVID-19 continue to emerge in several countries, governments make it clear easing restrictions is directly proportional to vaccines. Canada says it may permit fully vaccinated travelers into the country by early September if the current trend in vaccination rate and public health conditions continue. Over in Europe, England is removing most restrictions from the 19th of July, saying a rapid rollout of vaccines has largely broken the link between infections and serious illness or death. But the United Kingdom's chief medical officer says people should approach the end of curbs with caution. Spain's Barcelona is to impose a night curfew again amid rising cases. Spain's 14-day infection rate has surpassed 500 per 100,000 people for the first time since mid-February. The situation continues to worsen elsewhere too. The World Health Organization says Africa recorded a 40% rise in deaths this week.
As this surge sweeps across Africa, we're witnessing the brutal cost in lives lost. Deaths have climbed steeply for the past 5 weeks, jumping 40% in the past week. This is a clear warning. Our hospitals are at a breaking point. In all, 153,000 people have sadly died.
South Korea says tighter limits on private gatherings may be needed as treatment centers fill up, prompting calls for more people to be allowed to receive care at home. Thailand has reported a daily record of 9,692 cases as authorities struggle to tackle the country's biggest wave of infections so far. The Philippines has detected its first locally acquired case of the more infectious Delta variant. Indonesia is struggling to cope with a devastating wave driven by the Delta strain, which has left hospitals overflowing. Many infected people are unable to get a hospital bed and simply die at home. In such times, about 35 volunteers in Bogor, south of Jakarta, recover the bodies of people that have died from COVID-19 while isolating at home.
On the first day, we only received a call for one death, maybe because the hotline number was not widely known then. On the second day, there were 3 deaths, but today, nearly a week after the group was formed, there are 7. So the condition is gradually worsening. The condition in Bogor city is worrying.
The Delta variant has picked up pace in Australia, and officials have urged people to obey lockdown measures that cover around 40% of the country's population. Meanwhile, Abu Dhabi has announced a partial lockdown and new entry requirements in the Emirates starting 19th of July. Saudi Arabia has arrested more than 120 people suspected of supplying or procuring fraudulent vaccine and test certificates 2 days before a tightly controlled Hajj amid some of the strictest rules in the world.
Pakistan has reported 31 deaths from COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the nationwide tally of fatalities has reached 22,720. The ministry says the virus infected more than 2,300 people overnight. It says there are over 4,300 active cases and nearly 2,400 of them are critical. The country's caseload is approaching 984,000. More than 917,000 people have recovered from the disease so far. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has called for a coordinated global response to COVID-19, global recession and climate change. Addressing the UN's Economic and Social Council, he said Pakistan has played its part in tackling the crises. On the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, he said the first phase of the project has been completed, with the second phase already underway. He also highlighted Pakistan's efforts for regional peace and said Islamabad wants stable and peaceful Afghanistan. In India, at least 4 people have died after falling into a well in central Madhya Pradesh state's Odisha district. Locals say some 40 villagers fell into the well while attempting to rescue a child. Eyewitnesses said the collective weight of the people led to the collapsing of the well. Officials say 20 people have been rescued, while some 16 remain missing. They say a search and rescue operation is underway. Turkey says it has killed 7 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in the Tel Rifat region in northern Syria. The defense ministry said the militants attacked a Turkish base within the Operation Euphrates Shield Zone. They said 3 of the neutralized terrorists were from the group's main base in Mount Kandil in northern Iraq. The ministry and the other 4 terrorists were neutralized in strikes on their positions in Sheikh Isa and Ain Dakana. Ankara holds the fighter group responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year conflict. Moving on, U.S. authorities are struggling to suppress a huge wildfire that displaced roughly 2,000 residents in southern Oregon. It is the largest among dozens of blazes raging across the drought-stricken western United States. In Canada, an Indigenous nation has called on the government to release residential school attendance records to help identify unmarked graves. This comes as specialists presented the full report on the discovery of 215 unmarked graves near the Kamloops Indian Residential School. The nation said they expect more graves to be found as the search continues. The ground surveying teams have identified potential grave sites after searching 2 acres near the school. More than 160 acres still require investigations. Chief Roseanne Casimir said the finding prompted fresh commitments from the First Nation to continue work at the site.
I look forward to a fulsome conversation where we can finalize the details of the federal government providing the needed supports as well as access to our student records, and also to continue to shed light on our missing children that are buried in our care.
Kamloops Residential School in British Columbia was the largest in the country. Opened under a Roman Catholic administration in 1890, the school had as many as 500 students until its closure in 1978. Now moving on, in Britain, the inventor of a jet suit that allows the user to fly like an Iron Man has unveiled the newest electric-powered suit. Let's see how does it work.
Richard Browning, founder of Gravity Industries, says switching from jet fuel to an electric-powered suit will push the limits of what is possible. He says the suit has enough power to run a number of houses.
Electric suit has enough power to run a small street of houses. It is phenomenal how much energy you need in a small form factor to get a human off the ground, and it really just brings home how much energy you have in gasoline or diesel or those fuels. So we're getting there. It'll only ever get better.
It has previously been tested by the paramedics in England's remote regions to get them to people in distress faster. The company has also demonstrated its suits to the Royal Marines to test how they can assist in maritime boarding operations.
Yeah, so military and search and rescue, I mean, they are new applications, but no, they're very real. We've done enough exercises with both of those groups now in a variety of countries to prove that there's actually a really powerful role for the equipment. So yeah, watch this space.
Gravity Industries was launched in March 2017 with founder Browning demonstrating his jet suit all over the world. The suit can hit speeds of over 128 kilometers per hour and is capable of reaching an altitude of 12,000 feet.
More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. And other business updates, the U.S. stocks have fallen as the latest retail sale numbers came out better than expected. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose more than 0.25% at open. The S&P 500 landed in the negative category, opening a little over 0.25% lower. The tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite fell nearly 0.1% lower at open. Meanwhile, oil prices dropped, heading for their biggest weekly drop since at least May, as expectations of more supplies spooked investors. And now for weather updates, we have Naila with us.
Thank you. We're going to start with Abu Dhabi, where it is expected to get extremely hot with temperatures rising to 43 degrees Celsius. While in Amsterdam, the weather is pleasantly cloudy with temperatures at 22 degrees Celsius. If we head to Ankara, the weather is mostly sunny with temperatures at 35 degrees Celsius. Now moving to Under Auckland, the clouds will get in the way of the sun, but the temperature is chilly at 17 degrees Celsius. Now, if you are traveling to Bangkok, the clouds will be overhead. Temperatures there will be around 33 degrees Celsius. While in Beijing, there are going to be clouds in the forecast with temperatures at 30 degrees Celsius. While in Beirut will experience mostly sunny weather with temperatures at 31 degrees Celsius. Berliners will experience a bit of cloudy weather with temperatures at 28 degrees Celsius. Now heading to Cairo, the hot sun will be excruciating with 39 degrees Celsius as the temperature. Down in Canberra, the winter rain is keeping things chilly at 10 degrees Celsius. In Islamabad, the sun is out with temperatures rising to 36 degrees Celsius, while in Jakarta, the temperatures are steady at 33 degrees Celsius with some partial sun. That's all for now. Back to you.
Thank you, Naila, for the weather updates. And that is all for now. With the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.